last couple of times I've spoke, I talked about first American title and then the economy. And honestly, I just didn't want to do either. And the fact that I was tasked to speak today, I didn't choose today. It just was sort of assigned to me while I was down recovering, and then I came back and I was chosen to speak today. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about my life a little bit, okay? There are 3 conversations that shape the person you see today. I used to be somebody very, very different. So 5 years ago today, I was laying in an ambulance. I had gone to an early morning appointment, and while I was laying in an ambulance 5 years ago this morning, about 6 a.m., prior to the ambulance, while I was sitting in the car waiting for the appointment, I began projectile vomiting blood. And not just blood, but blood clots that looked like slugs, right? So in a period of about 10 to 15 seconds, my gray hoodie is covered in blood, and obviously I'm in trouble. So they get me onto the ambulance, and I recall vividly being on the ambulance, but my vision is tightening. I can see like a black cone starting to circle my vision in, and that makes me very nervous. So I say to the EMT who's riding with me, am I in trouble? And he says to me very calmly, we're not in good shape, buddy. And then he says to the driver of the EMT, how long? And the driver says 15. And he says to the driver, doesn't have it, do better. And so now I'm dying right now. Because what I just heard him say was, and I feel the ambulance, the lights are going, that ambulance is floored, we are flying. But I heard him say, I'm still awake enough to hear you don't have 15 minutes. So I get to the hospital, and we're gonna stop there, and I'm gonna tell you how I got there in the first place, how I ended up in the back of that ambulance. So as you can see in the picture here, and as I've said in part 1, there were high places that precipitated that fall, right? I was a college baseball coach. How I ended up there is I played baseball when I was younger, but I just decided that when I was a little lost in my life that maybe baseball would do a nice job of helping me find my way. So in 2016, I have a dear friend. He's my friend to this day. He's a head college baseball coach. And I said, hire me, let me be the pitching coach. And he said to me, rightfully so, can't do it. I love you to death, you're all over the place. I can't have you as a role model for my young man. Just can't do it, B. I love you, but the answer's no. And so I took that personally, and I found a pitching coach job at another school in his division, so he'd have to see me every year. That's just the way I'm wired, right? I'm petty, and I'll admit that. So the place that I took the job had never won in 80 years. They had 2 winning seasons in 80 years. My friend told me in a laughing manner, hey, you can take that job, but good luck, right? And so what you should know about the next 5 years is that I spent a lot of time building a program. The last 2 years at Asbury University, which is where I am here, we were 52-16 over a 2-year period. The problem was I got very lost in that success. It became about me and not about them. There were pretensions of cold-heartedness and cold-bloodedness and being a tough guy and all of these things. And I created a very adversarial energy for my life. Everything was always combat in my mind. I had very few friends. All that mattered to me was winning, okay? So at this point right here, at this tournament, I had met someone earlier in my life. His name is Judge Bob Armstrong. He's a judge in Selma, Alabama. Doesn't matter how I met him. But he and I had a connection and become very, very close. It's not the way you're thinking. We've become very, very close. So his tournament is in Alabama, and he texts me and he says, hey buddy, I'm coming to the game, I'll see you there. I'm super excited to see him. It's about an hour before the game, and he texts me and he says, I'm in the parking lot. Come out here, I want to talk to you. What? Like, I'm trying to get my starting pitcher ready for the game. It's a tournament. We're not doing all of this, right? Nonetheless, he's my friend. I go out to see him. I get in the car, and he says to me, hey, I'm only going to be here for a minute. What? He drove 5 hours. He was like, I'm not going to be here very long. I'm not watching the game. I came for you. God sent me a message last night, and it's for you. And so I'm very frustrated, because at that point in my life, not a believer. I'm beyond frustrated with this man that I'm trying to win, and he's interrupting me. And he just says very calmly, change is coming in your life. And it's going to be scary, and it's going to be a lot, and it's for you. And I said, great, thanks, man. Have a good day. Ran back to the field, get ready to go, right? At the end of this season, we get beat by my friend's school to end our season and a lot of the seasons of seniors who I love very much. And I took it really personally. At the end of that season comes conversation number 2. Conversation number 1 was the judge. Conversation number 2 is the parent of a ball player that I coached. After we've been eliminated, we're in the hotel, and he says to me, can you take a walk with me real quick? And I said, yeah. I coached his son for 5 years, long before college. I coached him prior to college, and he followed me to college. And this father says to me, okay, listen now. You've done amazing work the last 5 years, but you do this thing where you joke about not being trustworthy. And we all laugh and we find it funny because you joke about how you're not worthy of coaching our kids and the whole thing, and you're very self-deprecating, and it's really cute, but it needs to stop. Because 5 years ago, I gave you my son, and you gave him back to me this weekend, and he's a better man. So the stuff where you act like you're not trustworthy, it has to stop, and it's got to stop today. And I really appreciate that. 6 weeks later, I made the decision to leave Asbury and go join my friend's team. Because we had given them such trouble for a couple of years, he hires me as the pitching coach at IUS. On August 17th, I'm walking to center field, and I go down. What I didn't tell you about the entire time I was at Asbury is that I had been throwing up 2 to 3 times a week, and there was blood in my throw up, and I didn't tell a soul. Why was there blood? Because I was a drug addict when I was younger, and I had torn my stomach lining apart. So I'm dying. I'm not telling anyone that I'm throwing up blood. Why would I do that? Because the only thing that mattered to me was winning baseball games. That's how far gone my identity was. That's how lost I was, okay? So I go down. They try to save me one time. I get released from the hospital, and then I go down a second time. I arrive at the hospital as we've talked about. This surgeon comes running in, Asian gentleman. I can see him very clearly. And he says to me in a panicked voice, I don't have time to warm the blood up. It's got to go in cold. You have 40% of the blood you're supposed to have in your body. You're having a heart attack because your heart can't handle it. So the blood's going in cold. It's going to lock your whole body up in a seizure. And I laugh a little bit because in my mind, I'm like, nah, this will be fine. And he says to me, scream. Because screaming lets me know that you're alive. You're still with us. I cannot describe what it feels like to have cold blood hit you when you're unprepared for it. They strap my arms out left, right. They hoist the bed up vertically, and they stick in both arms, and they hit me with the blood. And I scream at the top of my lungs. It's unbelievably brutal. So the next several days, 10 to 12 days, I'm fighting for my life. I had 23 blood transfusions to keep me alive. I had 3 scope surgeries. And then finally on August 31st, a surgeon comes in from Oregon. They had flown him in for me because I'm in bad shape. Everything continues to fail. The scopes have failed. And he says to me, tomorrow's going to be the worst day of your life. I need you to get ready for it. That morning, he takes half my stomach and half my small intestine on September 1st, 2021. And he saves my life. And then comes the third conversation. 6 days later, as I'm in the hospital awaiting, and by the way, that picture you saw before, that was me as I was trying not to die. So you see where I am now, the juxtaposition, right? 6 days after he performs that surgery, he comes back in and he sits down. And he says, all right, son, I have to go back home now. I have a family, I have a practice, I came here for you. But I have to tell you some things, and you're going to shut up and listen. And he said it that aggressively. He was frustrated with me. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you're 36 years old. Previously, the youngest person I've ever done a partial gastrectomy on was 71. You'll be the youngest I've ever done this on. And then he says to me, do you know what a release of liability is? And I said, no. And he said, I was under the impression that we were taking a risk to try and save your life. So you don't remember this, but you signed a document releasing us from liability. That document stated that if you died on the table, we would not be held liable for attempting to save your life. And he said, I have to give them odds. It's the way the legal process works. I want you to look at this for me. And he hands me a piece of paper. And on the paper, he had written a 0% chance of life. And so he says to me very calmly, young man, I am telling you that you're not supposed to be here. And yet you're sitting right in front of me. So maybe do something with it, huh? And he got up and he walked out of the room. 2 months later, I tell the head coach of IUS, I've waited for that job my whole life. This is it, buddy. We're going to do 1 season, and then I'm done. I won a championship that season. It was fantastic. 1 month after winning a championship, I moved to Texas, and I met Monica. My entire life was waiting for me in Texas. And so I say all of this to say, if you ever look at me and you wonder why the consistency, why the suits and the effort and the loyalty to his faith and family and all of these things, the answer is very simple. because I used to be something very different. It used to be only about me. And that was a terrible way to live your life. So what I hope you take away from me today is, no matter what your life is, go after the dreams that you have. Go confidently in that direction. You can absolutely do it. Thank you very much.